Welcome to Night Light. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and, with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Welcome, everyone, to the show tonight. The theme of the show is Riding the Wave into 2021. And it's too soon, I think, for us to process the enormous changes going on in our world and within us as well, since we're in the throes of a pandemic. There have been a lot of change. There's been a lot of change going on globally in so many different ways. And our personal evolution is really taking shape and taking hold, or the Great Awakening, as we say, is at hand. We're in it now, in the Aquarian age, and it's just such an explosive and transitional time for not only the people of the earth, but the institutions, the thought forms, the beliefs, the history. Everything is being questioned, whether good or bad. This is where we seem to find ourselves. So that's, Barbara, where I wanted to start tonight in really marking this new Aquarian age and all the changes bringing in and bringing in at an accelerated rate.
I totally agree with you. I think that, but of course, we've just gone through the progression of the equinoxes, and so there's huge, and we just came through the solstice, so that on top of everything else, there is this immense energy going on.
Yes, very much so. And so it was interesting for the solstice itself. I found myself in the New York Catskills in an area where I call it a distortion-free zone, deep in the woods, where you can really, for someone like me who's highly intuitive, who channels, who is very receptive to earth energies and celestial energies, to work with a small group for us to bring in any information, any energies through our body, as the harmony and the coherence of being in an environment like that gives you at the time of a solstice or an equinox. And it was so palpable this time, even in winter when you couldn't really be immersed in the earth there like you normally are in the warmer weather, because, feet on the earth, barefoot, fires through the night and stuff like that really connect you to the stars and the animals there and the woods. But nonetheless, still being outside a bit and really connecting with a vital, I'd consider it almost even a dragon ley line up there, certainly a very powerful, energetic ley line, and what that does to the human body itself when you're in that kind of environment, especially at a solstice, and especially one this, with all the energy that this one seemed to embody.
Well, humanity as a whole, though, was already going through a time frame of incredible being charged and being overwhelmed and being, the energy of humanity was so crazy to start with that, it's sort of like, where do you go from here?
Well, I was struck, if I can take a step back, when I did come home and get through the holiday, the Christmas time, I happened to just fall into watching a documentary on CNN about the pandemic of 1918, 100 years ago. And I said, I really don't know much about that. And it was an hour long, and I was already 10 minutes in. But I said, let me see if there's anything I can learn, anything I could take away. I was just trying to relax a bit. And so I was startled when I watched it how technologically advanced we are in 100 years. And that might seem like a lot of time to some people, but really looking at society as a whole and how they dealt with the pandemics. I mean, there were some, uncanny similarities, but aside from any politics and that sort of thing, and just looking at where the nurses and the doctors, what they had available to them to help the sick, those who were coming down with the virus, the way that they used gauze as a mask, and and they wrapped it around 4 times, let's say. It was better than nothing, but it wasn't really effective. And then you look at the healthcare workers today that have, shields and masks and so forth, but even that they didn't have antibiotics back then to treat the underlying bacterial infection that was accompanying this virus. And today we take, antibiotics for granted. And so they didn't have that. It was just fascinating to see, again, someone who studies a wide expanse of history, both, regular and esoteric. I'm usually moving between thousands of years. So to me, I thought, wow, look at the advances that we've experienced even in 100 years.
Yeah, no, I will grant you that. But at the same time, I think that there is certainly the panic of the pandemic. There's the isolation and depression that goes along with that kind of isolation. And energetically, everybody was on edge. And the closer we get to the shifting between 2020 and 2021, I think that my impression is that it's going to increase tremendously.
Everything I read in a few excellent astrological forecasts, what one woman in particular was stressing, and it really rang true for me, was that whatever you have right now within you, whatever you're feeling, whatever you're experiencing in this pandemic, but also let's expand the phrase to a pandemic experience. That's how Archangel Michael referred to it, months ago in May of 2020, that there was such an experience around this pandemic as well. And I think that, validates what you're just saying. And so what they were saying is when this doorway opens, whether to the Aquarian age or you're saying the new year, marking that transition, that whatever we're holding in this period of time now will amplify. So if we're feeling fatigued and stressed and cut off from others, that will amplify. If we're feeling any kind of joy or even peace or even relief, that will amplify. And so it's really an important thought to consider for the listeners tonight, to be mindful of what we're truly radiating from our emotional body in particular, what we're feeling, what we're thinking, because now it is set to amplify even more. And I know that's probably what a lot of people don't want to hear, but if we can do something about it and make certain choices as to what we're feeling and get a handle on that in some way. I'm not saying any of this is easy for a lot of people at all. I'm just saying that would help things even collectively.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, and I've always said, and I truly believe that we do create our reality by our perception of it. So that, because we've been so isolate, we haven't been able to work with group energy as much as we would have liked to. So that we're having to rely basically upon our own, unless, of course, we get together with other people either on the phone or on Zoom or on Skype or whatever and blend our energies that way. It does feel as though this is going to be a time of great awakening, and it's kind of like, what are we waking up to? And that, I think, is the big shift, change, challenge, whatever you want to call it. That yes, we're all waking up, but what are we waking up to?
And I'd like to add to that. What are we waking up to? In what frequency are we awakening up in? So that again, this goes to thoughts and feelings and beliefs and emotions. If we've done some inner work, some kind of initiatory pathway, some kind of devotion and discipline, however, there's many pathways, but if we've done some of that and we have some sense of how to center, how to balance, how to bring in the heart-brain coherence technique, or how yoga might balance energies, or whatever it might be, I think we're a little better equipped to wake up with, okay, things look a bit daunting right now, but I've got tools in my toolbox that will help me through this time, through this rough passage, and into a better place. And I think it's so important for us, especially with the laws of attraction, to understand that we're actually, radiating a vibration or a frequency, and the more we can be, if not in love, at least in peace, or at least in acceptance, those kinds of feelings that will help more. But I think for those waking up in fear who perhaps have not taken the time or had the time to go within in some capacity, then I think it looks much different. The landscape in our world looks much different. It looks like everything is collapsing, like the house is burning down, like the tower in the tarot deck. And I guess, again, like you said, like I believe, perception is reality. So I think that, especially in winter now, certainly in Connecticut, this time can be used to really awaken and learn how to initiate ourselves into a more expansive reality, and how that can help us, rather than waking up in the fear of what things look like right at this moment. Does that make any sense? It does. It's but you're coming from the perspective of someone who is spiritually oriented, and that does change things dramatically. I know this is also, though, that time frame, one of the two time frames that occur during the year where the veils are thinning, and so we are losing people that are passing over, because it's easier to pass over during this time frame. So and that's something that is the same every year. It's not like this is something new. It's been going on since the beginning of whenever. So that there's a lot going on here, and I see a lot of people becoming very wearied of this entire process, and I'm fascinated to hear what Archangel Michael said, and also in your write-up you talked about the Knights Templar leaving behind stuff, and I was curious as to what that was. Yeah, and these aren't easy concepts, but I'm going to try to, especially with the Templars, but I'm going to try to simplify it to the best of my understanding. But just to recap, it's been about a year now since the original Archangel Michael dream, where I was alerted to a situation in a local urban hospital, which I believed was Yale New Haven Hospital, not far from me, if you will, and how people were infected. And I'd had no experience of a pandemic, so it was really off my radar. And then Magdalene came in with a channeling, I'll never forget it, on January 26th, and when you're channeling something, when something comes, you could be doing a whole channeling, and yet there's a line that comes through that you just know in your bones as it's coming out that there's something big there. And I remember her saying, in a channeling, that much will change in the blink of an eye. And I knew there was something, again, to that, but I had, again, no the idea of a pandemic was beyond me. And I figured, much is changing because we're going through this great shift and great awakening. And then you and I did a radio show. We've been connected all year, and we saw the artificial rain and the satellite, and we went towards the Andromeda strain, and I reviewed all of that information. And then later on, Michael said, in the channelings, you must sustain yourself till at least January, or it was at least 8 months, which is January 2021. And I didn't realize at the time that, well, how accurate that would end up being, which makes me wonder, was our behavior so predictable collectively, or was it that they can see future timelines? I mean, these are things I always am very curious about, and also that connects to the Templars. And I'll get to that in a minute. But so I was like, well, okay, so January is my marker. And everything I've done since May of 2020 has been to prepare through January of 2021. So that was a marker that came up pretty early on. And one of the things that Michael said was that if we can stay in the vibe of love, heart-centered, we are in coherence, and we can literally hear them clairaudiently, Michael and his group, which he calls the benevolent ones, and they will instruct us, and we will get through this time, and we will be okay. And so that was really, really comforting. But then some of the messages started to get more difficult, and I really didn't want to share them because I knew that there was enough difficulty out there. And when I had the very last vision until the winter solstice in the Catskills, I was shown, and I may have said it on this show, and I'm going to paint the picture and then save that for maybe 10 or 15 minutes down the line and move to the Templars. But the last one, and I don't recall, I believe I shared this with you, but I'll repeat it anyway, that I was shown the Earth, and I was further out in space, and I had asked Michael, please give me a vision, a visual, something to know where we are now. And he showed me from the vantage point of looking at Earth, but being further out in the atmosphere. And I could see the Earth's axis spinning a bit faster. And I didn't really know what to make of that. Does that just mean evolution is speeding up? What does that mean? So I'm told, look to my left. And when I look to my left, I see quite what I would call a mothership, but I kept referring to it as a machine because in my scanning of it psychically, I could see no apparent organic life form on that machine-like UFO, if you will, that huge ship. But I knew that there was a beam coming from it that Michael was showing me, and that beam was directly going to the axis of the Earth. And that's what was causing the spin to go faster, for that axis to move faster. And that's all I was given. And again, I'm left with, well, that could have a couple of different meanings. And so when I looked into the science of what the axis speeding up might affect or produce, it wasn't good. I mean, basically, we're toast if that really happens, right? I mean, we are. And I thought, well, I'm prepared for that because I've been on this road a long time, and I see those as possibilities, and, I've lived a very full life, so I guess if that's where it's at, that's where it's at. But I have a heart for humanity, and I thought, wow, it just seems like we need more time. We can experience, we can turn things around, we can do better, if you will. And so I kind of shut it down after that because I thought, well, what is the point? If this is just going to be, destructive in some way, I don't want to know anymore because I'm just going to be in the moment and do the best I can. But so that was the whole, and that's a real snapshot glimpse. There's a lot more detail in these channelings, which I'm putting in my book, along with others that have been channeled during this last, not just this year, but this year will be kind of the core of that pandemic experience and this great awakening. So before I go on to the Templars, is there anything maybe I need to clarify that, sounded a little bit confusing, or does that make sense to you?
No, it makes sense, but the speeding up of the rotation and even the shifting of the rotation is what the Native Americans have been calling that the sky is wobbling, so that there is a shift as the Earth does kind of shift its axis ever so slightly, but ever so slightly is a big move, for a whole planet. So
right.
it could also be part of that process that's going on, because it is time for that kind of a magnetic shift that has been in pattern over the last couple million years.
You're right, but it's odd that we're seeing it or coming up to that possibility on Earth when there are so many people on the face of the Earth and our technology is very advanced. It may have been advanced in other timelines or epochs, we don't know. But I think even looking at that CNN documentary, even in the last 100 years of all, I believe, the assistance we've been getting from other sources, other beings, the help that humankind has been given over this last 100 years has really advanced us, and we don't even know the half of the government technology and AI or artificial intelligence that we really do have operating in our world, right?
No, that's very true. I think half is generous. I don't think we know, 3/4 of what's going on.
Yeah. So throughout this year, I've mentioned a few times on the shows we've done that it was actually my son who forwarded me a declassified document done for Army intelligence in 1987, which definitely spoke of many of the concepts we're talking about. So apparently even in 1987, which was 33 years ago or so, that the government was already moving in this direction, although poo-pooing it on the outside. And basically they were looking to see, in this particular 29-page document, they were looking to see if it was possible to fast-track remote viewers in to ramp up their awareness and their skill level to be accurate and effective remote viewers. Remember, this would be militarized. This would be for governments, for military, for strategic purposes. And so they were looking at the gateway process in HemiSync, and they were wondering if that could speed it up so that they didn't have to wait for people to go through the age-old process, basically, and these are my words now, not theirs, of initiation, of learning, of experience, of wisdom. That's a longer process, or has been in the past. And so they were looking for that to happen much sooner because they had a need, they felt, and they were in a hurry, right, cutting corners. And so that was done in 1987. So I say these things because, as you were saying, geez, there's a lot we don't know. I totally agree with that, and I think we're at a much than even we understand in reality. So when I look back on that last vision that Michael provided, that ship that I kept calling a machine, I kept calling it because there was no organic sentient life form on it. So to me, on some level, that's AI. And on some level, it's helping the Earth speed up if the vision that I saw from Archangel Michael is accurate. Now, everything in the last year, never mind prior to that, has been extremely accurate. And there's been a lot of detail that I haven't shared because I really wanted to wait and see, is this holding up? And it is. Okay. So let's just kind of put that aside because there is a piece of it I really would like to get your input on, Barbara. But if we go to the Templars, okay, you and I both have a passion for Rennes-le-Chateau, for Mary Magdalene, for the mysteries, the Cathars, Southwest France, and how it's moved through the Holy Grail and the Arthurian legends and so on and so forth. Well, the Templars were a complex bunch, and what the lower rungs of the order were doing were not the same as what the inner circle was doing. And it's my belief, based on lots of research and experiential visioning, that the inner circle were highly experiential, and they were working with ancient concepts of understanding how to draw down the energies of the stars and certain alignments in the heavens at solstices, equinoxes, and certain, perhaps maybe eclipses as well, powerful times. And in those deeper trance states, which they were going into, and we know they were doing this in Portugal, but they were doing it elsewhere, that they were receiving cosmic downloads like we talk about today. And they were imbuing their certainly the Gothic cathedrals that they were funding, and making them initiatory temples and also places of acoustic resonance. This is where I'm getting to. So in the acoustic resonance part of their work, I have been in little tiny chapels. Like there's one right at the foothill of Pêche-Cardue in Rennes-les-Bains, which is outside of Rennes-le-Château. The whole region is mystical and magical. And there's this little tiny verified 11th or it's either 11th or 12th century. It's very old, tiny, tiny little chapel. And it's in Serres, Serres. And when you can get into it, because it's often locked down, but when you can get in, if you sing or chant or even have someone, one time somebody was playing a guitar in there when I was in there, tiny, teeny little place. It is such a highly resonant chamber. And it's already like almost 1,000 years old, right? They were doing this at the foot of the mountain using sound and most likely initiation, drawing energy from a rose line, a very ancient rose line from Scotland to France, to southern France. And you have to ask yourself when you're standing there, why? But you can't even ask yourself why when you're in there if you're singing, which is what I do when I bring my groups, because your whole body is ringing like a bell and you feel so intense, and it's just doing things, producing sensations in the body that are inexplicable. Is that clear enough so far in terms of some of what they were doing with acoustical resonance?
Oh, yeah, and I can relate to it, definitely.
Okay. So obviously they were doing this, and obviously they were privy to information. Some believe they had the Book of Enoch with the science hundreds of years before the alleged Freemasons found it once again. And I believe that they actually were. But what was the greater purpose? On one hand, it was to initiate themselves to become more master adepts. And again, we're talking about more of an inner circle because they had, on the outer flanks, they had people managing commanderies and preceptories, military and money and commodity and they were a really busy group. I think they were all reborn Essenes. Yeah. Right. Right. And they definitely were working with ancient principles, but there was this really deeply esoteric part of them. And this is what I've been able to piece together thus far. This is taking in a lot of people's work, including my own, and it goes something like this. They were working with acoustic resonance at a very high level. And on one hand, it could have been to levitate certain objects and spin them around. I mean, I think Lawrence Gardner wrote about that in one of his books where he talked about the Ark of the Covenant being levitated up from the labyrinth in the great Gothic Cathedral of Chartres in France outside of Paris. To what purpose? I don't know. When I first read it, I thought, wow, that sounds really cool, but like how and why? And, just to me what were obvious questions, and I never had answers. But as I've continued on this journey, my son says I'm obsessed. I just can't leave it behind. That like, why would they be doing this? I mean, just to levitate perhaps the Ark of the Covenant up to the top of Chartres. What would be the purpose of that?
Probably there was, Okay, go ahead.
No. What were you going to say?
It just seems to me that raising the Ark of the Covenant, which was a power tool to begin with.
Yes.
It almost feels like it had something to do with the combining energy with the energy in the Ark of the Covenant in order to raise it up.
Yes, I agree with that. And so you're entraining energy, but for what purpose? So I agree with that, and I think that's a really good insight. But then again, let's take it one step further. For what purpose? Why would you entrain the earth energy and the dimensions of a cathedral, which were very deliberate? You know, the inner inherent mathematical codes, dimensions, measurements. Why would you do that? Maybe because on one hand it resonates with the human body, and therefore the pilgrims that entered in could have their own initiation or awakening as they visited the Great Shark Cathedral, right?
Or it could be a demonstration of what one could do with the energy to take away the I doubt it's from people too. Okay.
You know, so I think that's right, but I think there's more. I remember meeting someone living right now, and I've met more than one, of course, people from the bloodline. And this is the Jesus and Mary Magdalene bloodline. And they have verified genealogies. So I remember this person telling me almost 20 years ago, before any of this really made sense, like I was just touching the surface of it all, that the Templars were very astute at time travel. Have you ever heard that before?
Never.
So they believed that, and this person knew things that were so far over my head at the time that I almost got angry because they were saying things to me that were just so beyond my understanding that I almost like was embarrassed what I didn't know, and yet it forced me to move beyond beliefs I had at the time to even hear them, right? So I really wasn't sure what to do with any of it, and she wasn't the first person to tell me that. But when she said it, like my bones, like I just knew that there was some level of truth to it. So in all these years when I have visited all these sites, both, you know, all in the UK, Scotland, England, Wales, France, Spain, and of course certain locations in the United States, there seems to be a way in which the Templars were using earth energies and certain acoustical resonance and an understanding of astronomy, astrology, to use these super harmonic moments to, and let's see if I can get the words out for this. It's like they put down a quantum marker at a nodal point in the earth based on earth energies, ley lines, intersecting points, so that there was some capacity to go back and forward in time. I know this probably sounds crazy, but what I've connected to, maybe because from that quantum now in that site on the land, which I have an uncanny ability to suss out, to find. It's like the earth calls to me, you know, maybe I remember it. Maybe I was part of this. Who knows? Maybe I'm insane. You know, that could be too, right? But I can laugh at myself. But what I do realize is that from the future time, which is 2020, and even for me these last 20 years, it comes forward in time. And when I'm at certain sites, at certain times of the year, which I always make sure that I am, that I can download that quantum message. And the only way I could do that, unless I'm misunderstanding is that either they were traveling forward to know, or they were certainly working with the quantum now, understanding a science and physics that wouldn't be understood for hundreds of years.
Yeah, I would go along with that. I just think that, of course, depending on what level of mastery they had, certainly after the 1300s, they were scattered for sure. And I keep being drawn back to, okay, if they brought treasures, and most of the treasures I do believe it was wisdom rather than objects, but they brought to this country treasure. And it's supposedly, I think, in Montana, I forget where, somewhere out in the West, that the final resting place is. And
well, Bill Mann in his two novels, and I know you've interviewed him, and I know you read The Last Refuge of the Knights Templar. He certainly talks about a mirroring or a location in Montana that has Enoch's vaults. In a way, there's 9 levels of a vault into the earth, guarded by Native Americans even to this day. So that's his take, although we have to allow for some of those power tools or legitimate material treasures as well to have ended up in Washington, D.C. I mean, that's the most logical place where some of them could be. And if the Templars were following the MO of the Essenes, they would have had a place here and a place there and a place there, because they never would have put everything in one location, right?
Right. No, that's absolutely true. I mean, no idiot would put it all in one place. So
right.
Knowing the value of what it was they had, certainly they would have broken it up. And I know Bill Mann said that he had stood on the place where the vaults were, and he just kept saying, it's just not time yet. The message that he was getting inside of himself was, it's just not time. And then as
was he standing in Montana?
Yeah. He went to the site.
Okay.
And, because of his connection with the Indians, because the Native Americans, because he is part Native American as well, that he was able to actually stand on the site. And I said, why didn't you dig? And he said, it just isn't time and we aren't ready.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there is the other theory that some of it is buried in Washington. And, frankly, with the way everything's going on in Washington now, I think they should move it. and
know.
They may well have. Because what has always fascinated me is that there have always been high-level Masons in all the important places and spots to help facilitate the building of certain structures, and the Blue Lodge, which is the masonry that most people know, is just the first 3 levels. When you get to Master Masons, it's a whole other ball of wax. And the secrets and the intensity that those gentlemen have is profound.
That's true, and certainly Scottish Rite Freemasonry in the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C. is cited on a major energetic line. I'll just keep it at that. I mean, there was one that I've been working with for years, but I never realized until a few years ago when I was using Google Maps to map out literally how to get a small group from the House of the Temple to Meridian Hill Park, that I realized that it was right on the line. And that was a line that I believe Jefferson was also aware of, and it has a nickname. It's called the God Meridian. And it's just highly energetic, and so they were using that form of geomancy and imbuing certain structures with that fountain of energy to give it that extra life force, that extra prana, that extra juice at the time where perhaps they were doing rituals, let's say in the House of the Temple, which is an extraordinary building that you can take tours in right now. No, but you can, and they use that to heighten the experience, and also to get it's always been known by the great adepts that when you do it at that time, whether you're in the sarcophagus in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid in Egypt, or at the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C., or at the tiny little chapel in Serres by Rennes-les-Bains in France, that it's the same download, it's the same receiving of the cosmic energy and information that comes with that, which has been used to enlighten people on the face of the earth for thousands of years. But it's just like Bill Mann saying that to stand on the site of the vault in Montana, that it wasn't the right time, that this information had to be concealed in the darker cycles of time. But now we've shifted into the Aquarian age, and even though there's fear and negativity and kind of a battle between light and dark sometimes, it certainly feels like, these locations are revealing themselves because people like me and other researchers who've been doing this for a long time, we're figuring it out. Now, again, my journey is 20 years just in this aspect, and that's why my son said, "Mom, you are obsessed," because he said, "You just can't let it go." And I said, "But I don't want to let it go. This is something I'm destined to understand. Whatever that means, however it further plays out, who knows? But it's been 20 years, and there's just no letting up with the fascination and the attraction that it has. And that tells me that it's supposed to be that way, but it further tells me, based on current experiences, that time is drawing even closer."
Oh, yeah, and didn't Alan Butler and Janet Walter, in their book, American Nation of the Goddess, didn't they pinpoint another place in Washington where they believed that there was a vault where some of these treasures were buried?
Well, Alan Butler pinpointed that, and I don't know if he did it by himself or with one of the team of Lomas and Knight, the British authors, former Freemasons maybe. I'd have to fact check that. But Alan wrote the book on something like Washington, D.C., City of the Goddess. It's something to that effect. And then later on...
That was the book that he wrote with Janet Walter.
No, he did America, Nation of the Goddess with Janet. But he did a book on Washington, D.C., City of the Goddess, where he reveals the crypt or the vault. And then one of the many things that that Janet Walter and Alan Butler do in American Nation of the Goddess is that, at least in terms of Washington, D.C., they take most of the alignments of light and shadow at certain cycles in the calendar year that are either equinox-based or I think the rites of Demeter or certain ancient rites, and they use the Washington Monument as a phallic symbol, and they use the vault with that circle, that oval-type circle, as the feminine, right? And the new World War II memorial, which has an oval to where the water is, and it's the penetration of male and female, it's heaven and earth, and they catalog when those alignments and the play of light and shadow happens at those sites, mostly involving the Washington Monument and things on the National Mall. And what they do say, which is interesting, and this is how I know it's getting closer for time to be revealed and that the Templars literally are speaking through time, is that the World War II memorial, which was done, I don't remember if it was completed sometime in the 2000s, so recently, not that long ago, and the certain measurements and encodements that hold the ancient measurement are there, and that play of light and dark is, and shadow is also there too. So that says, based on their book, that the guardians who hold this knowledge are still alive and well and in very high positions in Washington, D.C., because that completion of the World War II memorial wasn't that long ago. And so that gives me hope that they're there. So that's one of the things they were talking about in their book, among many other things, the one they did together. And so it tells me that they just keep putting that out there, because initiates who walk, whoever they may be, who walk the earth and receive the download at the fall equinox or at a particular time, or maybe highly sensitive people, just if they go and visit, they may get a flash of something, but that this is being done because the time is much closer at hand for this information to be not just revealed, because it's been being revealed for a good 20 years or so, but to be utilized.
Well, I think what has always fascinated me when we are at times and places where downloads are happening, it is not, people are all getting downloads, but it's only in direct proportion to the level of enlightenment that they have inside of them at that moment in time. In other words, you and I could be standing next to one another and we'd each get a download, but it would be different, so that it's not the exact same information. It is information that helps us get to the next place where there is another download.
True. Yeah. Yeah, I think that we get the same download, but I think based on our bandwidth that's active is how we can consciously move with the information and the instruction and the teaching and the initiation. And for someone else, it's in there, but it's dormant. And only when their DNA is signaling to whatever systems in the body, the cells, the blood, the endocrine system, right, the third eye, there's a whole complex system within us. And I think if we come back full circle to the here and the now and what's happening in our world with this pandemic experience, is that, depending on the bandwidth that we have active and in play, is how we're going to remember more fully. But I think that other person, standing next to us who got it and maybe really wasn't awake, maybe just starting to ping a little bit inside, will receive it, but it will lie dormant for a while.
Oh, yeah, no, I totally agree with you on that one. It's just that, it would be cool if everybody just blazed into existence and knowledge of what they have, but that, unfortunately isn't the way it's charted to be. And so, you get something, and I said to someone once, who was very excited about just new information and everything, and I said, it is so cool, but you can't talk about it with many people, can you? And she said, no, they'll think I'm crazy. And I said, yeah, that's the problem with it. But more and more and more people are becoming, I guess, enlightened is a better word for it. They're coming to a place in time where they understand a lot of this other material that is coming through, and hopefully it can be put into play. I would love to see Washington, D.C. get a huge download, maybe tons of it, because I want to see people working together for the betterment of the country and humanity as well, instead of the fighting and the bickering that seems to be going on now. So we'd rather see governance and leadership into a bolder vision of a more equitable, just society, rather than seeing people play politics for power over. Right.
So the patriarchy, in my work with the sacred feminine, and certainly this was coming through in the Magdalene channelings that are in my trilogy for years already, that when it was time that the patriarchy would dissolve, it would turn upon itself and eat itself up, right? Because now as we're shifting, all that energy and focus on the patriarchy is starting to dissolve. They're fighting hard because they've been in power, and that's a power over paradigm. I have power over you. I can suppress you. I can dominate you. I can perpetrate violence against you. And we've said, I think enough of us have said in this world overall that no, we don't believe in that anymore. And as we, the people, and that's what America definitely represents, although right now it's a bit frayed, to say the least, but we, the people, from the ground up, must rebuild the new foundation. And so it's on us, too. Like, we can't just leave it to Washington to figure it out. Yeah, they can get the download, and the download is clearly coming through the Washington Monument there as an obelisk and in the highly charged ground that it sits on. But we have to demand more as well, and that's the hope of the new time, that there's so many people doing amazing things in this dark time, that we have to believe that we're moving in that direction, although it doesn't appear it to it, because we have to kind of go through the destruction zone to get to the other side.
Oh, yeah. Well, Sylvia Browne 20, 30 years ago said that about by this time frame that that we would go to a different form of government, that the form that we're now that we're now functioning with wouldn't suffice, and that government as a feature would be reorganized. So,
well, we're supposed to, in the American experiment, the next step is for a more enlightened democracy. And we are clearly not there yet, because we have corruption and we have politicians rather than leadership and governance and vision. And I think it will be up to us, we the people, to demand change from the ground up, and they will respond to what people need. Like, for an example, I just saw before we started the show a segment on a show where this young African-American, I think he's a playwright, but don't quote me on that, young, like 31, quite a lot of Tony nominations, I think, for theater. He's trying to find a way for the theater industry, all the people that work behind the scenes, to find some economic relief in this pandemic time. And he's going back to FDR's vision of the New Deal, but trying to modernize it for now. And while I didn't retain all the details of his vision yet, he's out there putting that out into the ethers, into the world, and saying, we must do this. And I thought, wow, that is really cool. And he's young, he's 31, and I'm watching people who are like 17 and 11 find ways to mobilize and get food to people and provisions and so forth. So I think it's really in this new time that it hasn't worked for us to give the power to somebody in Washington to do the right thing, because there's been so much corruption, but that we, the people, and that's kind of the cool thing of the Aquarian age, because it's very creative.
Oh,
It's a very creative age, but it takes risk and it takes bold vision.
Well, it's going to be fascinating the next couple of years. I'm so looking forward to it. With a little apprehension, but I'm definitely fascinated to see just where we go from here, because certainly there is a lot of change that is going to have to take place. And
yes,
I mean, obviously there's change. We're theoretically switching, presidents, and there will be shifts there, and it's just going to be fascinating. I hate politics, but certainly what's going on with everything at this point in time is, it leads one to say, holy mackerel, where do we go from here?
Oh, I know. It appears at times daunting, and then you get inspired by someone who's just not even considering that and just creating a program or an outreach in this time to get to people, to reach people. And again, that is certainly inspiring. But astrologically speaking, we have the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction that happened and this opening of the door to the Aquarian age. Now, there is 4 years from now, Pluto. Now, these are big planets, right? These are big influences in the world and in the cosmos, right? This whole cosmic connection. But Pluto moves into Aquarius in December 2024. So I think between now and December 2024, which I'm also told aligns with part of the Hopi prophecy, although I haven't verified that with my contact out in Second Mesa in Arizona, one of the Hopi mesas out there, but I will. And that in these next 4 years, the thing about it is it's so daunting, but the force is with us. And that, to me, in the big planets, in the big movers and shakers in the cosmos, they're moving. And when they move, that's big change. And the fact that the force is with us and not against us is what gives me hope.
Well, I think the one thing that all of us have to realize is that, saying that it's with us is one thing, but, so many people think they know how it should be, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's how it really is meant to be. And it's like, you have to be able to go with the flow, not try to direct the flow, but to go with the flow.
Well, I think that's been happening for a while. I know when I've worked in session with corporate types who are very admittedly type A, let's say, we'll work together, and some will even come on certain trips where we work with the earth energies. And a lot of them are very smart, and they get it by the end, and they say, like I get it now. Like you can't, it's no more forcing all this to happen. It's like we have to like allow and, like you said, go with the flow. And people are getting that, because when you're trying to make things happen that aren't supposed to happen now, the resistance is more intense than it's ever been.
Oh, yeah.
So you can go out there and you can try to be type A, but you're going to hit so much resistance, it's going to exhaust you.
Well, yeah, it's true. And, when you hear somebody say, I think this and I think that, then you know that they're stuck in their mind, they're stuck in their physicality, and they're not going with the feeling, with what's best for everyone. They're going, I think this is the way it should be, so this is what I'm going to focus on, and this is what I'm going to push for, and we'll make this happen. And something that's not how it works.
That's true.
So,
and I think we are shifting into a more heart-based intelligence. And the reason why I say heart-based intelligence is because the heart has a brain, and it is incredibly intelligent, and it sends signals from the heart actually to the brain. And as we move down from that overthinking to the heart-based intelligence, that's the wave, ground up, heart-based intelligence. Those are the new mantras of the new time. And I think it's something to be really excited about, although I know for a lot of people it's a shift. And it's something that they don't shift. and they haven't really heard. But the more that it's out there and the more you attempt, I do very simple techniques with groups so that we can bring that awareness from the mind to the heart and move from that place forward. And I think the more that people hear that and they do it and they feel it, the more they get it. And, it takes courage, because sometimes, people think you're crazy, but I'm at the point in life now where I don't care anymore, because I know that this stuff works and the old stuff is done. The old stuff is done. And this is the new stuff, and it works. And we have to be bold enough to shine that light. And when people feel it in their bodies, their intuition gets turned on, and they say, wow, I don't really understand this, but I feel like it's right.
Oh, sure. And often people will make a comment to me about like, well, this is what I want and I'm going to make it happen, and it's basically, well, you go for it, and then they
let
say
me know how
to
it works out.
Yeah, what do you want? And I said, well, I can tell you what I want, but I also will tell you that I'm open for the universe to give me more.
Yeah.
And then they look at me like I said, there's the old saying that you should have open hands and open arms and not clutching a fist. And there's an old, I don't know, fable, whatever, that a woman was she had in her head she wanted to win $1 million, and she prayed for it, and she meditated on it. She did sage, she did chanting, she did everything, and the powers that be on the other side were sitting there watching, and one said to the other, she was on track to win $10 million, but if all she wants is $1 million, okay. And
yeah.
So basically, it's be open for abundance of any kind, and whatever comes your way is magical and it's wonderful, and people are so intent on trying to make things happen these days, and it is uncomfortable with the pandemic. I mean, I'm fortunate. I'm retired, so I'm staying at home anyhow, so my life hasn't greatly changed with the whole thing. Well, I moved, but aside from that, everything is basically the same. And I know that people with jobs and people with children in school, and I know it's terribly difficult for them, but make it a happy experience, and it can be a happy experience. We're being given an opportunity to see different ways of doing so many things in our lives. And if you can make it joyful, then it's not an imposition, it's a gift. And
I agree with that, and I think if you can embrace different ways of manifesting, different ways of creating your reality, even if it's your daily life, right? Mm-hmm. We're not even talking about the big, amazing moments, but even in daily life, if you believe and are given some of the tools of how we know the nature of reality works and co-creation, and actually being very conscious about what you're thinking and feeling, and therefore what you're creating, it's amazing how this really works. And I think based on perhaps even exasperation or fatigue or totally burnt out, if that's what it takes for people to look into a new direction and walk down a new road and create realities that are more attuned to their life now in this time, then that's really something to be hopeful for. I think we should end on that, and then maybe next time work on how people are actually creating realities and how it's believed that the Templars as well, based on what they learned about the ancients, were also creating realities. I think you'll find that very interesting, Barbara.
Okay. We can do that, absolutely.
All right.
I think you've given them a lot of material to think on and to chew on and hopefully apply to their lives.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thanks so much,
right.
Gloria.
Oh, thank you,
good
Barbara.
Night,
we'll talk soon.
Okie doke. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And good night, everybody. Thanks for listening. Hopefully we'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.